The blue world hung in space like a jewel waiting to be claimed. Admiral Crover stood on the observation deck of his command carrier and looked down at the planet called Earth. The Eternal Empire had been expanding across the galaxy for over 10,000 years, and they had never encountered a species that could truly challenge them. The military records showed that Earth possessed only basic satellite systems and no weapons capable of reaching beyond their own moon. Eternal Empire had conquered and absorbed 47 different civilizations into its vast territories. Some of those civilizations had advanced technology and powerful weapons, but they all fell before the Imperial fleet, with 5,000 warships now descending toward Earth's atmosphere. Crover felt no concern at all. The smallest of his carriers could destroy an entire nation in mere moments on the planet below. In a command center hidden deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, Colonel Kevin Patterson watched something impossible appear on his radar screens. The radar operators around him had gone completely silent. All of them stared at the displays in shock and disbelief. Captain Patricia Morrison stood near the main console with her face very pale. "How many contacts are we seeing?" Kevin asked in a quiet voice that somehow cut through the heavy silence in the room. Patricia took a breath before answering. "Sir, we are counting approximately 5,000 large signatures approaching from the upper atmosphere. Multiple energy weapons detected on each vessel. Energy readings are beyond our measurement scale." The words hung in the air like a physical thing. 5,000 ships, 5,000 alien vessels descending toward Earth. Kevin's mind immediately went back to all the years of preparation and all the secret meetings in dark rooms with generals and scientists. The human race had been waiting for this moment in fear and in hope. He turned away from the screens and walked to a small office separated from the main command center behind a heavy metal door. Kevin found the red phone sitting on the desk, exactly where it always was. The red phone was connected to every major military facility on Earth. It was the communication line that had been prepared for exactly this situation. Kevin picked up the phone and his hand did not shake. "This is Patterson," he said into the receiver. "Activate Operation Phoenix, authorization code Alpha 79er Bravo. Activate full defensive protocol. All facilities go to combat status immediately. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." Within seconds, the order spread across the entire planet. Like a wave moving across an ocean, the message reached every hidden bunker, every secret facility, and every prepared station. All the locations that had been kept secret for so many years were now activated in a control facility in Antarctica. The operators received the order and began following the commands they had trained for. Hundreds of times, they checked the systems and confirmed that everything was working properly. The electromagnetic pulse generators buried deep beneath the ice were coming online. All of them hummed with power ready to be unleashed in London and Tokyo and Sydney and Mexico City and dozens of other locations around the world. The same activation sequence began. All of these facilities had been built in secret with international cooperation. The countries of Earth had finally put aside their differences to work together on something that mattered more than politics or money or pride. John Harrison was the chief engineer who had designed the entire defensive system over the past 12 years. He was sitting in his office at the DARPA facility in Virginia. When his secure phone rang, he knew what the call meant before he even answered it. The invasion had begun. "All systems are green," the voice said from the other end. "The fleet is descending through the upper atmosphere. We have approximately 90 seconds before they reach firing position." John closed his eyes for a moment and thought about all the work that had gone into this moment. All the equations and calculations and the late nights spent arguing with other scientists about whether this could possibly work. Now it was time to find out if their theories would actually save their world. At NORAD, Kevin was connected to all the facilities through secure channels. He could see the status of each location on his main screen. Green lights appeared as the defensive grid came online. The network spread beneath this Earth like a nervous system ready to send out a signal. The signal would use the planet itself as the weapon Admiral Culver walked across his bridge with complete confidence in his expression. The invasion of primitive Earth would be his greatest triumph. The Empire would add this world and these strange humans to their territory, and he would be remembered as a great military commander. His ships passed through Earth's atmosphere without any defensive fire coming up to greet them. The sky was empty and dark, and the human world was about to change forever. Kevin watched the distances decrease on his screen. The alien ships were now clearly visible to satellite cameras. The images showed massive vessels, larger than anything humans had ever built. They moved with terrible purpose toward major population centers. Kevin took a breath and gave the order that would change human history forever. "Activate Phoenix Level 1, he said into the communication system. "All stations fire on my mark." He paused for just a moment, thinking about the millions of people who would feel what came next. Fire. The first electromagnetic pulse fired from Station 1 deep beneath the Antarctic ice. The pulse was incredibly powerful, and it moved outward from that location at the speed of light. The might technology that produced it was a combination of human physics and years of experimental engineering. The pulse spread through the planet's magnetic field and up into the ionosphere, creating invisible waves of electromagnetic energy that covered the entire world in less than a second. Admiral Culver felt it before his instruments could even detect it. A sensation of wrongness moved through the command carrier. The lights on his bridge flickered once, and then everything went dark. The power systems that had never failed in his entire military career suddenly became completely useless. "What is happening?" he demanded from the darkness. His voice carried the authority of someone used to instant obedience, but his officers had no answers to give him, because they did not understand what was occurring. The electromagnetic pulse was devastating to alien technology. The Eternal Empire's ships relied entirely on advanced energy systems and quantum processors for every single function. Navigation systems that guided the massive vessels through space went offline. Weapon systems designed to level entire cities became inert metal life support systems that kept a crews alive began to fail. Communications networks that connected 5,000 ships into one coordinated fleet shattered into nothing across Earth's sky. The alien invasion fleet turned into falling debris. Warships that had never been threatened by any enemy suddenly lost all ability to function. They fell through the atmosphere out of control, burning as they descended. Ships collided with each other in the darkness. Ships crashed into mountains and oceans and open land. The great armada that was supposed to conquer Earth became a graveyard spread across the entire planet in his command center beneath Cheyenne Mountain. Kevin Patterson watched the radar screens as the 5,000 contacts simply vanished from view. One moment they were there as clear enemy signatures, and the next moment they were gone. The radar showed only falling debris and scattered contacts that were no longer transmitting any energy signature at all. The invasion had lasted less than 2 minutes from first contact to complete destruction. "Status report," Kevin said calmly, though his heart was pounding hard inside his chest. Captain Patricia Morrison was checking the data from all the defensive stations around the world. Her voice was steady as a professional soldier when she reported, "Sir, all Phoenix stations have fired successfully. The electromagnetic pulse propagated at planned efficiency. All stations are showing green across the board. The invasion fleet has been neutralized. No hostile energy signatures remain in Earth's atmosphere or orbital space." Kevin felt his knees weaken slightly. He had to sit down in his chair. The first battle between humanity and an alien civilization had just happened, and humanity had won. The plan that had seemed impossible for so many years had actually worked around the world in other command centers. Military personnel and scientists were watching the same results. In London and Moscow and Beijing and Washington, the implications were beginning to sink in. The human race had just defeated an invasion force that had been completely overwhelming in terms of military power. The victory had come not through superior weapons, but through human intelligence and human planning and human desperation. In California, a scientist named Dr. Linda Chun was monitoring the systems from a secret facility. The electromagnetic pulse had affected more than just the alien ships. It had also damaged the power grids across most of the planet. Hospitals were now running on backup generators. Airports had lost all electronic guidance systems. Water treatment facilities were offline. Communication networks had gone dark across entire regions. The cure for the alien invasion had also wounded the world that needed to be saved. Begin Phase 2 recovery protocols, she said into her communication device. All available personnel. Activate emergency power restoration procedures. We have a narrow window to restore critical infrastructure before secondary failures cascade. In Texas, an electrical engineer named Margaret Thompson was part of the team that had designed the hardening protocols for critical infrastructure. She had spent the last year working with military teams to install protective equipment on hospitals, power stations, and water treatment facilities. Now, as the electromagnetic pulse spread across the planet, those hardened systems came online and stayed online while everything else went dark. Margaret was at the Hospital of St. Anthony in downtown Lubbock when the power grid died. Then seconds later, the hardened backup systems activated and the hospital's critical systems stayed online. The people in surgery rooms never missed a single beat. The machines that were keeping patients alive kept working. The lights stayed on, the water kept flowing. Margaret saw a doctor come out of a surgical suite, and the doctor was crying. She was crying because her patient had survived, and her hospital had power, and the world was not ending. She was crying because they had actually done it. They had actually saved themselves. Across the ocean in London, a similar scene was happening. A woman named Susan Walker was watching over her young daughter in a hospital bed. The girl had been born with a heart condition that required constant monitoring. Susan had been terrified that the invasion would happen before they could do the surgery they needed. The news of the alien fleet had come just hours before the scheduled procedure when the power failed. Susan's heart had broken. But then the backup systems came online and the monitors showed that her daughter's heart was still beating steadily and the machines were still working. The surgery happened anyway, and her daughter was going to live. The aliens had tried to invade, and they had failed, and her daughter was going to live around the planet. Billions of people realized that they had survived something that should have destroyed them. The Eternal Empire had sent 5,000 warships to conquer Earth, and Earth had destroyed them all in seconds. The impossible had happened, and humanity had done something that no other species in known space had ever done. They had stood alone and won against an enemy that was far superior in technology and power, but the victory came with a price. The electromagnetic pulse had damaged global infrastructure. Power was out in many regions. Water supplies were compromised. In some places, people were beginning to panic. In other places, people were helping each other stay calm and working together to restore services. The same human ability to cooperate under pressure that had defeated the alien fleet was now being used to save their own world. In Washington, D.C., Kevin Patterson received reports from every major military facility on Earth. All the Phoenix stations were reporting mission success. The invasion fleet was completely destroyed. The alien technology could not function in the presence of the pulse. The human world had won the right to continue existing as an independent civilization. He looked out the window of the command center and saw the darkness of the city lights going out one by one as the secondary systems stabilized and then came back online. He thought about the 5,000 alien ships burning in Earth's sky, and he thought about the people working right now to rebuild what had been damaged. He thought about a species that had survived ice ages and wars and plagues and now had survived the invasion of an alien empire. Humanity had proven something on this day. They had proven that survival was more important then technology. They had proven that intelligence and planning could defeat power and strength. They had proven that when everything was on the line, humans would do whatever was necessary to survive. 3 days after the invasion, the celebrations across Earth had mostly stopped. People realized that they had won a terrible victory. The alien fleet had been destroyed, but the damage to human infrastructure was becoming clearer each day in Africa. The power grids had collapsed completely, and without electricity, many hospitals were running out of backup fuel. In South America, communication networks were still offline, making it impossible for governments to coordinate aid and recovery efforts. In Asia, the loss of power had disrupted food supply chains, and people were beginning to experience shortages of fresh water and medical supplies in a secure underground facility in Denver, Colorado. Dr. Linda Chun worked around the clock with her team of scientists. They were managing the global recovery effort from that central location. The decisions they made would affect millions of lives. The first priority had been to restore power to hospitals and emergency services. The second priority was water treatment facilities. The third priority was the communication networks that would allow governments to coordinate. A recovery response general, Christopher Gray, was the military commander who oversaw the Phoenix Project. His dark eyes reflected the weight of command as he reviewed casualty reports coming from around the world. "How many?" he asked Dr. Chun quietly as they stood together looking at screens showing infrastructure status across the planet. Linda took a moment before answering, because she was checking the latest numbers. The immediate deaths from medical failures are estimated at 300,000. The secondary deaths from accidents and failures of infrastructure are still being counted. In cities where the electromagnetic pulse was most intense, the damage to electronic systems was more severe. Christopher nodded slowly. He'd made the decision to activate Phoenix, knowing that there would be costs. If he had not activated it, the invasion would have succeeded and billions would have died. The math was terrible, but it was clear. Earth would have lost against the alien fleet if they had tried to fight with conventional weapons. And the alternative, Christopher said quietly, if we had not activated Phoenix, what would we be counting now? Linda looked at him. 5 billion deaths. Sir, all human life effectively ended. The extinction of our entire species. Around the world, the recovery efforts began in earnest. Governments worked together in ways they had never cooperated before. The old tensions between nations suddenly seemed very small compared to the task of saving their world. Emergency supplies were shipped to regions where the damage was worst. Medical teams worked without sleeping to help people who were injured in the chaos. Teams of engineers worked to restore power systems and communication networks. A young man named Robert Davis was part of the power restoration team in New York City. He climbed up damaged electrical poles, checking which transformers still worked and which ones had been fried by the electromagnetic pulse. His hands were covered in cuts, and his back ached from the constant climbing. But he kept working because he knew that people needed power to survive. He thought about his wife and daughter at home, and he worked harder in India. A woman named Priya Sharma was leading a medical team that had set up a temporary clinic in a public square. She had no hospital anymore because the hospital was destroyed when one of the alien ships came down in that part of the city. So she had set up tables under a tent, and she treated people who came with injuries and illnesses. Her team was exhausted, and they were running out of medicine, but they kept working anyway. 5 days after the invasion, the first international team of scientists reached the crash site of what had been Admiral Crover's command carrier. The ship had come down in the Arctic Ocean near Greenland, and specialized ships had recovered parts of the wreckage. The alien technology was both beautiful and horrifying to look at. It was constructed from materials that humans had never seen before, and it operated on principles that seemed to violate the laws of physics they had always. Believed. Sarah Winter was a linguist and xenologist brought to study the recovered technology and the data found in the wreckage. Her job was to understand what the aliens wanted and why they had come to Earth. She worked with the recovered computer systems and slowly began to translate the alien language. The words that appeared on her screen filled her with a mixture of fear and something else, something that felt like validation. The aliens had known about Earth for hundreds of years. They'd observed the human race with a kind of academic interest. The alien council had discussed whether to contact Earth or to simply leave the planet alone. One faction in the alien government had wanted to invade immediately, believing that humans were primitive and easy to conquer. Another faction had wanted to study humans longer. The invasion faction had eventually won the political argument, and the decision had been made to send the invasion fleet. But there was something else in the data. Sarah found messages from alien researchers warning that humans might be more dangerous than they appeared. One researcher named Zulfak had written extensively about human capacity for innovation under pressure. He had analyzed human history and found patterns of rapid technological advancement when humans were facing extinction. He had recommended that the Council be very cautious about any military action against Earth. His warnings had been largely ignored by the political leadership of the Eternal Empire. They believed that technology and power were the only things that mattered in war. They believed that a species that had not developed interstellar travel could not possibly threaten their fleet. They believed that 5,000 warships would be more than enough to occupy and pacify any world. Sarah presented her findings to the United Nations Security Council in a special session. The aliens believed we were primitive and helpless, she said to the assembled leaders from around the world. They did not understand that humans do our greatest work when we are facing extinction. They did not realize that a desperate species is often the most dangerous species. A general from Japan asked a question that everyone was thinking. Then why did they invade if their own experts warned them not to? Sarah looked down at the documents in front of her. Because they were confident in their superiority. They believed that their power was absolute, and that no species could ever challenge them. They made the assumption that technology could defeat anything. They were wrong. Around the planet, the wreckage was being studied, and the alien technology was being carefully examined. Scientists were beginning to understand how the alien ships worked and what made them operate. The knowledge contained in the wreckage was worth more than all the gold in the world. It was worth more than anything because it represented 1,000 years of advancement that humans could now learn from and build upon. Kevin Patterson stood in a new command center that had been hastily constructed after the Phoenix activation. He looked at maps showing the distribution of crash sites, showing the areas where the electromagnetic pulse had caused the most damage, and showing the recovery operations now underway. He thought about the choice that had been made, the choice to save the entire world at the cost of temporary suffering. That choice had been the right one. 2 weeks after the invasion, the power had been restored to most major cities around the world. The water systems were working again. The communication networks were back online, and for the first time since the attack began, the human race could take a moment to breathe and to understand what had happened and what they had learned. The wreckage of the alien fleet was scattered across the entire planet. The largest crash site was in the Arctic Ocean, where Admiral Krulver's command carrier had come down. Scientists from dozens of countries worked together in teams, diving to the depths of the ocean to recover intact sections of the alien ship. They brought up pieces of technology and fragments of data storage devices and records that had somehow survived the destruction in a laboratory in Geneva, Switzerland. Dr. Sarah Winter worked with a team of researchers to piece together the data found in the command carrier systems. They used every technique they knew to bypass the alien security protocols, and slowly they began to access the information stored in the alien database. The files they found were a complete record of the Eternal Empire's knowledge about Earth and about humanity. What they discovered shocked them all. The aliens had extensive information about human history. They had studied every major civilization, and every important technology that humans had developed. They knew about ancient Rome and ancient China and ancient Egypt. They knew about the invention of the wheel and the development of writing and the creation of mathematics. They knew about every major war and every significant discovery. But what was most remarkable was that the alien researchers had studied human psychology and human behavior patterns. One researcher in particular, named Kovastiks, had written extensive reports about human responses to extreme stress. The reports showed that humans did not give up when facing impossible odds. Instead, humans became more creative, more determined, and more willing to take risks when their survival was threatened. Kovastiks had specifically warned the Eternal Empire Council that humans were dangerous, not because of their current technology, but because of their capacity to innovate under pressure. He had written, "The human species shows a disturbing pattern of rapid technological advancement when facing existential threats. They have survived ice ages and plagues and wars without their species being destroyed. This suggests a resilience and adaptability that could make them a serious threat if given proper motivation." His warnings had been dismissed by the council leadership. One council member had written, "These creatures are primitive. Their warning systems are barely functional. Their weapons are crude and limited. If we choose to invade, we could do so easily with a fraction of our fleet." Kovastiks is being overly cautious and allowing ancient fears to cloud his judgment. Sarah presented these findings to the United Nations. In a full briefing session, the representatives from every nation listened with growing astonishment as she explained what the alien civilization had known about humanity and how they had dismissed the warnings of their own experts. "They knew we were dangerous," the French ambassador said in disbelief. "Their own scientists told them to be careful, and they invaded anyway. They believed their technology was absolute." Sarah explained, "They believed that in any conflict between advanced technology and raw power technology would always win. They did not understand that humans are capable of thinking creatively under pressure. They did not believe that a primitive species could ever truly threaten them." A general from Brazil asked the important question, "So what do we do now? What is the human response to knowing that we destroyed an invasion fleet from a galactic civilization?" The answer came from Kevin Patterson, who was now recognized as one of the architects of the human victory. "We prepare for what comes next," he said simply. "The Eternal Empire will discover that their fleet never returned. They will send investigators to find out what happened when they learned that their 5,000 ships were destroyed in seconds. They will have to make a decision about how to respond. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." In a facility in Japan, a team of engineers began the work of reverse engineering the alien technology. They focused on the power systems and the titus propulsion systems because they believed that understanding how alien ships flew might give humanity the knowledge to build their own spacecraft. One engineer named Takeshi Yamamoto studied the power core from a smaller alien vessel with intense concentration. The Voyager power core was unlike anything humans had ever built. It seemed to generate energy from nothing. But when Takeshi studied the records from the alien database, he began to understand the principle. The core worked by tapping into quantum fields and drawing energy directly from the structure of space itself. It was not magic. It was physics that humans had theorized about, but had never had the means to implement. "This is revolutionary," he said to his team leader. "If we can understand this technology and build our own versions of these cores, we could power everything. We can have unlimited energy." News of the breakthroughs in understanding alien technology spread quickly across the planet. Scientists became heroes. Researchers who spent their careers in obscurity suddenly became famous around the world because they held the keys to understanding the alien technology. Young people declared that they wanted to become scientists and engineers instead of following the old career paths in New York City. a memorial was being built to honor those who had died in the attack and in the recovery efforts from the electromagnetic pulse. Their names would be carved into stone. The memorial would stand as a reminder that victory always came. With a price that humans had to pay, an older man named Thomas Brooks, who had lost his daughter in a hospital that lost power during the initial electromagnetic pulse, stood before the memorial and wept. His daughter had been recovering from surgery. When the power failed, she had been strong and she would have survived if the hospital had kept power for just 3 more hours. Instead, she had become one of the costs of saving the world. But even as he wept, Thomas also felt something else. He felt anger at the fact that the aliens had forced this choice upon humanity. He felt determination that humanity would survive and would grow stronger because of this experience. And he felt hope that maybe the knowledge gained from studying the alien technology would someday lead to medical advances that would save thousands of lives, like his daughter's life could have been saved around. The planet people were experiencing similar feelings of grief and anger and determination and hope. The human race had been tested and had been found worthy. The human race had faced extinction and had not broken under the pressure. The human race had looked at an impossible situation and had found a way to win in a command center in Washington, D.C. Kevin Patterson watched the recovery efforts and the beginning of the research into alien technology. He thought about the warnings from the alien researcher named Colvastix, and he wondered what would happen when the Eternal Empire learned about their lost fleet. He knew that Earth's true test was still ahead of them, and that the invasion was just the beginning of humanity's encounter with the larger galaxy. 6 months after the invasion, humanity had fundamentally changed. The United Nations had been reorganized into a planetary government with representatives from every nation, working together toward common goals. The old conflicts that had divided humanity seemed petty and meaningless compared to the knowledge that other civilizations existed in space and that at least one of them wanted to conquer Earth. The first human space program designed to reach beyond the solar system was being organized. In a facility in Nevada, a man named Marcus Chun was the chief engineer of what would become humanity's first interstellar spacecraft. The ship would be called the Dawn, and it would carry human explorers to nearby star systems to learn if there were other threats or if there were potential allies in the galaxy. Marcus stood in the workshop where the hull of the Dawn was being constructed. The ship looked different from human spacecraft designs because it incorporated technology recovered from the alien fleet. The fusion reactors were adapted from alien technology. The navigation systems used principles discovered from studying the alien computers. The materials used in the hull were stronger and lighter than anything humans had previously created. "How much longer until she is ready?" his assistant James asked as he looked at the ship with pride. Marcus smiled. 3 more months for the basic construction, then another month for testing and calibration. The Dawn will be the most advanced human spacecraft ever built. She will carry humanity into the stars, on the other side of the planet in a facility in India. A research team led by Dr. Priya Sharma was working on something equally important. They were designing a defensive system that could protect Earth from future invasion attempts. The system would be based on the same electromagnetic pulse technology that had defeated the Eternal Empire, but it would be improved and distributed across multiple locations so that no single failure could leave Earth undefended. Priya worked late into the night reviewing calculations and simulations. "If another fleet comes," she told her team, "we will be ready. We will stop them just as we stopped the first one." In a university in London, students were studying the alien language and the alien culture, trying to understand what motivated the Eternal Empire and what kind of civilization had built such advanced technology. A young woman named Emma Davies was particularly interested in the alien philosophy and ethics. She read the writings of Colvastix, the researcher who had warned about human danger, and she began to understand that even among the aliens there were voices of reason and caution. Emma began a research project analyzing whether it might be possible for humans to communicate with the Eternal Empire and negotiate peaceful coexistence instead of preparing only for war. The idea was controversial, but some people believed she was right. If humanity could understand the aliens better, then perhaps future conflicts could be avoided. In military academies around the world, a new kind of soldier was being trained. Soldiers who understood that Earth's greatest strength was not weapons, but the human capacity for innovation and cooperation. Military leaders studied the victory over the alien fleet not as a military lesson, but as a lesson in human nature and human psychology. The Phoenix Project had worked not because the weapons were perfect, but because humans had worked together with perfect coordination and perfect timing. General Christopher Gray retired from active duty 6 months after the invasion. He gave a speech to the new military leaders who would take over the defense of Earth. "Remember," he said, "that we defeated an enemy that was superior in every measurable way. We did not win because we had more ships or more weapons. We won because we were willing to sacrifice and because we understood that cooperation was more important than individual glory. We won because humans are capable of thinking beyond themselves and working toward a common goal. We must never forget that lesson." In a small town in Argentina, a celebration was being held to honor the people who had worked on the Phoenix Project. They had brought together engineers and scientists from around the world to work on a secret project during a time of deep international tension. But they had put aside their differences and created something beautiful, something that had saved humanity. The people of the town gave them a parade and called them heroes. Marcus Rodriguez was one of those scientists. He had worked on the electromagnetic pulse generators, and his contributions had been crucial to the success of the project. He stood with his daughter on his shoulders, watching the parade pass by. "You see," he told his daughter, "when people work together, they can do incredible things. They can save the world." 1 year after the invasion, the International Space Council announced that humanity was ready to launch the first interstellar mission. The Dawn would leave Earth orbit in 30 days, carrying 50 scientists and explorers to investigate the nearby star system Proxima Centauri. The mission would take decades, but it would be humanity's first step into the larger galaxy. Kevin Patterson stood in the Launch Control Center watching the final preparations for the Dawn. The ship represented everything that humanity had achieved since the invasion. It represented human ingenuity and human courage. It represented humanity's refusal to accept defeat or extinction. The ship was a message to the galaxy that humanity was not a species to be dismissed or conquered. As the launch countdown began, Kevin thought about everything that had happened in the past year. He thought about the people who had died in the electromagnetic pulse, and in the chaos that followed, he thought about the people who had worked tirelessly to rebuild and to recover. He thought about the scientists and engineers who had studied the alien technology and had begun to understand. "I thought about the day when 5,000 alien ships had descended on Earth and had been destroyed in seconds." He thought about the moment when humanity had understood that they could survive anything if they worked together. He thought about the future ahead, when humanity would take its first steps into the stars. Launch countdown reached 0, and the Dawn lifted off from the launch pad. The ship accelerated upward into the blue sky, and then into the darkness of space. The cameras followed it as it moved away from Earth, becoming smaller and smaller until it disappeared from view. But it did not disappear completely. It moved steadily toward the star system, where human explorers would search for new worlds and new civilizations. In the moments after the launch, Kevin allowed himself to smile. The human race had survived the invasion. The human race had learned from the experience. The human race had taken the knowledge of alien technology and had begun to use it to reach for the stars. The human race was ready for whatever would come next. Around the planet, people watched the launch together. In parks and public squares, they understood that they were witnessing a moment of transition. A moment when humanity had stopped being a species confined to a single world. A moment when humanity had stopped being prey and had begun to become explorers. And perhaps eventually explorers of a hostile galaxy where other civilizations might not always welcome human visitors, but humanity would go forward anyway, because that was what humans did. They survived, they adapted, they innovated, and they reached. So something better, even when the path was uncertain and dangerous.